Brooklyn Nine-Nine is one of my comfort shows. The show feels like a warm hug and I come back to it time and time again. But as I have rewatched the show in recent years, I've become more attentive to the show's more problematic aspects. And one of them is the way in which predatory, sexually inappropriate behaviour is often belittled and played for laughs. In this video, I'm going to discuss the ways in which predatory behaviour is presented in Brooklyn Nine-Nine and my issues with it. Before I begin though, I want to make it clear that I love Brooklyn Nine-Nine, and you should be able to like a show and also critically engage with its more problematic aspects. I also wanted to make this video because I felt like, unfortunately, a lot of people are not talking about this. When carrying out some research for this video, I came across a compilation with 2.5 million views, and it's basically a compilation of Gina harassing Terry for 10 minutes straight. Yet this video has 42,000 likes and pretty much all the comments are positive. And I think that this unfortunately does show that the harassment endured by the men on the show has gone virtually undetected by the majority of the audience of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I want to use the examples of Holt and Terry as a useful vantage point to discuss the ways in which men, but also in particular black men, who are victims of harassment are often not taken seriously. Gina, Captain Holt's assistant, makes persistent sexual remarks towards Terry. Her harassment lasts for at least 3 seasons of the show, and she makes really weird, sexually inappropriate comments. She continuously sexualizes Terry by commenting on his physique and how attracted she is to him. With Wunsch's harassment of Holt, this is less frequent and it mostly occurs in season 2. In season 2, it is revealed that the reason why Wunsch and Holt fell out was because she was attracted to him and Holt rejected her advances. There are a number of uncomfortable scenes in season 2 where Wunsch pats him down for an extended period of time and even kisses him without his consent. While the harassment does manifest in different ways, the predatory behaviour towards Holt and Terry is played for laughs. Another key reason why the harassment of Holt and Terry is not taken seriously is because of rigid gender expectations. Men are expected to be masculine and strong, and therefore it's not really seen as possible that a woman can overpower a man or harm him sexually. Social myths prevail that men are always wanting sex, and thus it's seen as impossible for men to be victims of harassment or assault. Harassment is constructed as something that only women can be victims to, which feeds into this persistent stigma around male victims. Professor Megan Stroshine said on the issue, "Males can be particularly unlikely to report and come forward because victims are thought to be weak, vulnerable, unable to protect themselves and in need of help or assistance. These attributes conflict with many men's definitions of what it means to be a strong man in contemporary society. If assaulted by a woman, male victims may be afraid they will not be believed." Terry and Holt's blackness plays a key role in the way that we as an audience digest their harassment. Before I delve into the negative portrayal of black men in the media, I want to note that Terry and Holt do not adhere to these stereotypes of black men. With Holt, he is overly formal, he doesn't show his emotions, and the absurdity of his behaviour is often a source of humour, but his love for the squad soften him and make him an endearing character. With Terry, he is definitely more masculine, but there are attempts to soften him by showing that he's kind and has loving relationships with the squad and his family. Terry is also given little idiosyncrasies, such as his love of yogurt, fantasy books, or French film, which humanise him. So while Terry and Holt are not necessarily incarnations of racist stereotypes, years of racist messaging means that the writers of the show and audiences do not see them as worthy of sympathy when they are subjected to predatory behaviour. Black men have been historically hypersexualized. We see this through the Mandingo stereotype, which describes black men as possessing these insatiable sexual appetites. Black men have also been depicted negatively through the black brute stereotype, which describes black men as destructive, animalistic, and criminal. In an article that I read by Professor Tommy J. Curry, he describes how black males are stigmatized as violent brutes throughout multiple sectors of society. among law enforcement, educational institutions, the at-large public, and even among many academics. Black men are theorized as terrors and popularly imagined to be pathological in nature. Professor Curry also goes on to show that this construction of black men as hypersexual deviant criminals has permeated academic spheres. He notes that prominent feminists of the 1970s argued that gang rape was, quote, an attempt by black men to project their manhood after desegregation and was a normal feature of the Negro male subculture of violence. We see this in the American media persistently. For example, in the 1990s, when there was the kind of implementation of tough on crime legislation, which was disproportionately having a negative impact on communities of colour, particularly young black men, there was a great deal of moral panic around the super predator. He was a violent criminal who preys on his victims, and the super predator was often presented as a young black man. More recently, with the rise of social media, we have been able to capture the impact of these negative images of black men. Videos go viral which show how snap judgments are too frequently made about black men and how they're often viewed as criminal and threatening. I promise that I did not just read one article for this video, but I think that returning to Professor Curry's work is useful again here. He says, the association of black males with violent threats is so strong that multiple psychologists have observed that simply seeing a black male body or having a black male's name triggers aggression, threat construction, and a fight or flight response among many white people. This powerfully highlights how we can absorb and be influenced by these racist images about black men and how profound this impact is. It can literally temporarily alter our physiology. I think that more contemporarily, we see this hypersexualization of black men persist in hip-hop. Hip-hop is one of the most popular and influential genres of music, and the images of black masculinity in hip-hop send messages that influence how we perceive black men. In an NPR interview, Professor Miller Young speaks of how the recent popularization of hip-hop has fed into this hyper-consumption of black masculinity, which Professor Young links to black men being linked to a symbol of sexual prowess. And I think that these images of hard masculinity project a narrow image of what a black man is, and this is incredibly dehumanizing. It means that we see black men as being less eligible for sympathy. While black men have been persistently seen as hypersexual and aggressive, white women have been continuously portrayed as virtuous and feminine, and this portrayal has its roots in slavery and was constructed to perpetuate and justify the cruel institution. The innocence of white women has been emphasized in order to present her as the antithesis to the barbaric hypersexual black woman who deserved to be enslaved because of her apparent inherent savagery. And this has had a significant impact on the portrayal of white women for hundreds of years. And I think that this image of white women has meant that audiences struggle to grapple with the fact that white women do terrible things. And it means that we often fail to hold them accountable for their wrongdoing. So when Gina harasses Terry and constantly hypersexualizes him, we are socialized to not take those horrible actions seriously because they've been carried out by a white woman. In recent years, in attempts to amplify the voices of marginalized groups, such as women, people of colour, and disabled people, we have this proclivity to see anyone from a minority group as inherently virtuous and morally good, rather than seeing them as human and complex. So I think that this means that when white women engage in sexually inappropriate behaviour, it's not taken seriously because we have been socialized to see them as victims, as those who do good, rather than understanding that assault and harassment is perpetuated not by a single gender or a single person. I also think that adultification is another really important concept to draw on in this discussion. Adultification is the dehumanizing process in which black children are seen as adults and are criminalized, which of course has negative implications on the way that black children are treated in society. For example, higher rates in the criminal justice system, or higher rates of exclusion in schools. We see adultification at work with the case of a young black girl who was put in prison in the United States in the summer of 2020 for not doing her homework. But this tendency to see black children as adults and demonize them does not happen to white women. In fact, the opposite happens. And so this continued tendency in society to victimize white women and not hold them accountable for their actions means that we see them as inherently innocent. And this construction of the innocent white woman and the hypersexual, brutal black man, I believe, is incredibly powerful in influencing the way in which we perceive relations between white female characters and black male characters. So with the case of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, when black men are harassed, it simply does not fit into this image that we have been taught of black men as violent and aggressive. And so when a white woman harasses them, it simply does not make sense and is at odds with the social images that we have been taught. Before I wrap up this video, I think it's really important to know that Brooklyn Nine-Nine is not the sole villain in this story. Pop Culture Detective has great videos on the way in which male victims of harassment are often used as punchlines in American TV and film. So while the depiction of harassment in Brooklyn Nine-Nine is insidious, it's part of a wider issue in the media, and we need to have open and uncomfortable conversations about the pervasiveness of this trope. It's really vital to think carefully and critical about what we are laughing at. What is so funny about a woman persistently harassing a man? So I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video, and don't forget to like, comment and subscribe, and please stay safe.